"Ma'am, this is not a museum. Take your little book and let real customers use the counter." The words carried across the marble lobby of Harbor First Bank in Savannah, Georgia, sharp enough to make people stop pretending they weren't watching. Evelyn Mercer stood at teller window 3 with both hands around a faded navy passbook. The corners had softened from age. A strip of clear tape held the spine together. To anyone rushing past, it looked like something pulled from a drawer after a funeral. To Evelyn, it was the only thing she had brought into that bank with more care than her own purse. The manager, Grant Bell, held it between two fingers now, as if it had been left on a bus seat. Behind Evelyn, the lunch hour line had grown restless. A contractor in dusty boots checked his phone. A young mother shifted her toddler from one hip to the other. Near the front doors, a security guard named Luis Alvarez watched with his jaw tight, saying nothing because the badge on his shirt did not outrank the suit at the counter. Grant gave the passbook a little wave. "This account number format hasn't been used in decades," he said. "And you're trying to deposit $10,000 in cash with this?" Evelyn's voice stayed low. "It is not cash. It is a cashier's check." Grant glanced at the check on the counter and smiled harder for the audience. From a credit union 3 counties away, with no appointment, no current debit card, no online profile, no valid proof this old booklet belongs to an active account. "My name is inside," she said. "So are a lot of things in old books." A few people in line murmured. One man gave a short laugh, then stopped when Evelyn's hand trembled against the edge of the counter. Grant leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound kind while still letting everyone hear. "Mrs. Mercer, people your age get confused. Sometimes relatives send them in with strange papers. Sometimes they think a bank is obligated to honor whatever they find in a drawer." Evelyn did not answer. That seemed to please him. He slid the cashier's check back toward her with one finger. "This branch has a donor event in 40 minutes. Board guests, local press, city officials. I am not having my staff tied up verifying a relic while you accuse us of mistreating you." "I have accused no one," Evelyn said. "Then don't start." The toddler near the door went quiet. The contractor lowered his phone. Even the teller beside Grant stopped counting bills. Evelyn reached for the passbook, but Grant pulled it back. "Actually," he said, "I'm going to retain this until we determine whether it's part of an attempted fraud." The lobby changed, not loudly, not all at once, but a small current of discomfort passed from person to person. A woman in a red blazer whispered, "Can he do that?" Someone else muttered, "That's too much." Evelyn's eyes lifted. For the first time, anger showed through the patience on her face. "That book is mine." Grant tapped the passbook against his palm. "Then you'll have no problem waiting while we call compliance. My husband's handwriting is in there." His smile thinned. "That does not make it legal tender." Evelyn's fingers closed around the strap of her purse. Her shoulders were narrow under a plain gray cardigan, and her shoes were the careful kind older women wear when their knees have started bargaining with every step. She looked breakable enough for Grant to believe this would end with an apology from her. Instead, she said, "Open to the first page." Grant blinked. "Excuse me, open to the first page." Something in her tone made Louise take one pace away from the wall. Grant gave a short breath, half laugh, half warning. "Mrs. Mercer, I don't take instructions from customers creating disturbances. You should today." The line went still. Grant's face tightened. He flipped the cover open with the careless motion of a man proving a point. The first page was yellowed, its ruled lines filled with fountain pen ink. There was an old branch stamp, a date from another century, and a signature written in a steady hand. Grant stared at it for 1 second too long. Then 2. Across the lobby, a woman with a press badge near the refreshment table noticed and raised her phone. Evelyn did not reach for the book again. Grant snapped the book shut. "Louise," he said, too quickly, "escort Mrs. Mercer to the seating area." But Louise did not move. because by then the woman in the red blazer had stepped close enough to see the name stamped beneath the old ink, and whatever she saw made her hand fly to her mouth. Grant's donor event was supposed to begin with a ribbon, a photographer, and a speech about trust. Instead, within the hour, the branch would be locked from the inside. The board representative would be demanding the original records, and Grant Bell would learn that humiliating one old woman in public could cost him the career he had built on polished lies. But to understand why Evelyn Mercer walked into that bank with an old passbook and no fear left to spend, you have to go back 3 mornings earlier, to a quiet kitchen on the east side of Savannah, where the book had been waiting in a drawer for 27 years. 3 mornings earlier, Evelyn Mercer woke before the sun, the way she had for most of her adult life. Her house sat on a narrow street in Savannah's east side, 2 miles from the bank and a world away from its polished lobby. The porch paint had begun to peel in thin curls. The live oak out front had roots that lifted the sidewalk, and every year the city sent the same notice saying repairs were under review. Evelyn made coffee in a small aluminum pot and poured half into a mug with a chipped handle. The other half she left untouched on the table, the way she had done since her husband, Thomas, died. It was not grief for show. No framed shrine, no dramatic speeches to empty rooms. Just the second cup. Just the chair across from her. Just a habit her hands could not give up. On the kitchen wall hung an old photograph of Evelyn and Thomas standing in front of a brick storefront, with no sign yet above the door. They were young in the picture, both wearing Sunday clothes, both pretending not to be scared. Beneath the photograph, in the top drawer of the sideboard, lay the faded Navy passbook. Evelyn did not open it every day. Some memories had to be visited carefully. That book held the first deposits of a bank that had once been nothing more than 3 rooms, 2 tellers, and a promise to serve people the larger institutions ignored. She and Thomas had started Harbor First in 1973, when black families in certain neighborhoods were still being told, politely or otherwise, that their money was welcome, but their dreams were not. Thomas had known lending. Evelyn had known ledgers. Together they built a place where a fisherman could finance a boat, a widow could keep her house, and a church secretary could open an account without being made to feel small. Then Thomas got sick. Then partners arrived with glossy folders and confident voices. Then Evelyn, exhausted and newly widowed, signed papers she had read too quickly because everyone told her the bank needed younger hands to survive. She had kept only one thing from those years without asking permission: the original founder's passbook. It was not valuable in the way thieves understood value. It had no magic code, no pile of cash waiting behind it. But the first page carried Thomas's handwriting, Evelyn's signature, and the branch stamp from the day the founding reserve account was created. Thomas had written one sentence in the margin, small enough that most people missed it. For the branch, if the branch forgets why. Evelyn used to think that line was sentimental. Lately, she had begun to wonder if it was a warning. Her daughter, Marissa, called at 7:15, right as Evelyn was spreading butter on toast. "Mom, did you check the mail from the bank?" Evelyn glanced at the envelope on the counter. It had arrived 2 days earlier, thick and formal, with Harbor First Bank printed in blue across the top. She had already read it 3 times. "I checked it." "And?" "They want me there Friday morning." Marissa went quiet. Evelyn could hear traffic through the phone and the faint sound of her granddaughter asking for a backpack from somewhere in the background. Marissa had 2 jobs, 1 child, and a patience that was wearing thin from life asking too much of her. "Mom," she said carefully, "that letter said if the dormant account isn't verified by Friday, they can close it and transfer the remaining balance to state custody. That's not nothing. It is not the balance I'm worried about." "I know." But Evelyn could tell Marissa did not fully know. How could she? Marissa had been 10 when Thomas died. She remembered hospital rooms, not boardrooms. She remembered her father's laugh, Not the night Evelyn sat at the dining table with four men explaining why the founder's old protections were outdated. The account connected to that passbook had been opened as a reserve, then folded into a trust agreement during the bank's expansion. Evelyn had not touched it in years. She had not needed to. Every annual statement arrived like a small proof that Thomas had existed inside the institution even after his name disappeared from the signs. Then the statement stopped. Then Harbor First sent the notice. Then Evelyn saw the announcement in the Savannah Morning News. The branch would host a donor event Friday at noon, celebrating its 50th year and honoring the leadership legacy of the Bell family. The Bell family, not Mercer. Evelyn had read that line so many times the words lost shape. Grant Bell was the grandson of one of the men who took over after Thomas died. Evelyn had seen his picture beside quotes about community trust and modern banking. Expensive suit, easy smile. The kind of man who had learned to sound generous when cameras were nearby. Marissa lowered her voice. "I can take off work and go with you." "No." "Mom." "I said no, baby. You have the school payment due." Her granddaughter's after-school program had raised its fees. Marissa was already behind on rent by half a month. Evelyn had planned to use a cashier's check from her small credit union account to help her catch up, but when the dormant notice arrived, she knew exactly where that money needed to go first. A deposit, a clean transaction, a reason the bank could not pretend the account was dead. Evelyn washed her cup and dried it with a towel faded almost white. Then she sat at the sideboard and opened the drawer. The passbook smelled faintly of paper, dust, and old ink. Her fingers moved over the cover with the care of someone touching a scar. She had balanced accounts by hand before computers replaced the big green ledgers. She had caught errors no one else could see because numbers had a rhythm, and lies always broke rhythm. Even now, at 78, she could read a financial statement faster than most young managers could find the footer. Not because she was afraid of the lobby, because she was afraid of seeing what had become of it. At 8:30, she dressed in her gray cardigan, the one without loose buttons. She placed the cashier's check in an envelope, tucked the passbook into her purse, and paused beneath the photograph of Thomas. "I'm only asking them to do what's right," she said. The house gave no answer. Outside, the morning heat had already begun pressing down. Evelyn locked the door, tested the knob twice, and made her slow way to the bus stop with the purse held close to her ribs. She did not know yet that the manager had already told his staff to treat old paper accounts as a nuisance before the event. She did not know that her name had been removed from an internal talking point. And she did not know that by Friday noon, the little book in her purse would become the one thing Grant Bell could not explain away. Harbor First Bank had learned how to polish memory until it no longer resembled truth. By Friday morning, the lobby smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh flowers. A blue ribbon had been tied across the entrance to the conference alcove. A small podium waited under a framed poster that read, "50 Years of Trust," with a photograph of the current building glowing in perfect daylight. No picture of Thomas Mercer appeared anywhere. Grant Bell arrived at 8 in a navy suit and a silver tie carrying 2 phones and the kind of mood that made employees stand straighter. At 39, he had already been featured twice in local business magazines. He gave quotes about access, stability, and neighborhood pride with a hand over his heart. Inside the branch, he spoke differently. "Today is not the day for nostalgia problems," he told the staff huddled near the teller line. "If someone comes in waving paper from the 70s, you do not improvise. You do not make promises. You send them to me." Tanya Reed, the senior teller, lifted a cautious hand. She had worked at Harbor First long enough to remember elderly customers by name and birthdays. What if it's a legitimate legacy account? Grant's smile barely moved. Then they can prove it through modern channels. Tanya lowered her hand. Grant clicked his pen against the clipboard. "We have Denise Harper from the banking board attending the event. We have donors. We have Savannah Ledger Press." We are not turning this branch into a lost and found counter. Across the lobby, Luis Alvarez heard every word from beside the security desk. He had been hired 2 years earlier after leaving the county sheriff's office with a shoulder injury and a careful respect for old people carrying old papers. His grandmother had kept insurance receipts in a shoebox until the day she died, and every one of them had mattered. But Luis also had a daughter starting community college in August. He could not afford to mistake conscience for job security. Grant's assistant manager, Miles Crow, stood near the printer with a tablet tucked under one arm. Miles was 28, ambitious, and terrified of being invisible. He laughed at Grant's jokes half a second too fast. "We can put a temporary hold on anything irregular," Miles said. "Compliance language gives us room." "Exactly," Grant said. "Use the rule. Suspicious instrument, unclear ownership, dormant status, inconsistent identification. Pick the cleanest reason and keep the line moving." Tanya's mouth tightened. Some of those people may not use online banking. "Then they can learn," Grant said. "The bank changed. That is not cruelty. That is progress." He said it as if progress always wore a tailored suit. The rule he liked most was simple. Any dormant account requiring manual verification could be delayed if staff suspected risk. On paper, it protected the bank from fraud. In Grant's hands, it protected the branch from inconvenient history. That morning, he had one private worry. In the old storage room behind the conference alcove, 3 archive boxes sat on a rolling cart. They had been pulled for the event because Denise Harper had requested historical materials for the board's anniversary file. Grant had not liked that request. Old records were messy. Old records had names that did not match the speeches. He had asked Miles to skim them. Miles found photographs, yellow brochures, and ledger index cards from the early years. Most were harmless, but one card carried the name Evelyn T. Mercer beside the phrase Founding Reserve Agreement. Grant had read it once, then slid it under a stack of catering invoices. "Keep that off the display table," he told Miles. "Is it a problem? It's a distraction." Miles understood the difference. A problem required a solution. A distraction required a drawer. By 10:15, the branch filled with ordinary Friday business. Paychecks, mortgage questions, small business deposits, a woman trying to replace a lost card. The event guests would not arrive until noon, but Grant had already begun performing for them in his mind. Then Evelyn Mercer came through the front doors. She was smaller than the name on the archive card had made her seem. Gray cardigan, black purse, careful shoes, hair pinned neatly at the back of her head. She paused just inside the lobby, not in confusion, but in recognition. Her gaze moved across the teller windows, the marble columns, the framed slogans about community. For one brief second, she saw the old storefront beneath all of it. Tanya noticed her first. "Good morning," Tanya said. "How can we help you?" Evelyn reached into her purse and removed the passbook. Tanya's expression changed, not with suspicion, but curiosity. "I haven't seen one of those in years. My name is Evelyn Mercer," she said. "I received a dormant account notice. I would like to verify the account and make a deposit." At the name, Mercer, Miles glanced up from the printer. Grant, who had been reviewing the podium notes, heard it too. Tanya opened the passbook gently. Her finger paused on the first page. "This is beautifully kept." "Thank you. I'll need to check the archive system." Tanya lowered her voice. "It may take a few minutes." "I have time," Evelyn said. That was the first mistake, at least in Grant's mind. People with time were dangerous. They could wait through delays, listen carefully, and notice when a story changed. Grant crossed the lobby with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm Grant Bell, branch manager. I understand we have an old account question." Evelyn studied his face. Not accusing, not warm. "Bell," she said, "I knew your grandfather." Grant's smile held, but his eyes hardened. A lot of people did. He used to stand by the back desk and say the front office was too drafty. Tanya glanced between them. Grant took the passbook from the counter before Tanya could enter the number. "We'll handle this through management." Evelyn's hand remained where the book had been. "Your teller was handling it. For her protection and yours." A faint flush rose in Tanya's cheeks. Grant motioned toward the waiting chairs. "Please have a seat. We're preparing for an event, so I'll do what I can when time allows." "I have a deadline today," Evelyn said. "Your letter gave me one. Then you should have come earlier in the week. I came when I had the deposit ready." Miles had drifted closer, pretending to adjust brochures. Louise watched from the door. Tanya still had the dormant notice on her screen, but Grant's body blocked her from the keyboard. Evelyn opened the envelope and showed the cashier's check. "This is to keep the account active while you verify the record." Grant barely glanced at it. Large deposits into dormant accounts raise questions. It is not large for this account. That sentence hung between them. Grant heard the threat in it before anyone else did. He gave the passbook back, but not into Evelyn's hand. He set it on the counter just far enough away that she had to reach for it. "We'll need current identification, source verification, and a signed acknowledgement that the bank makes no admission regarding the status or history of this account." Evelyn's fingers paused. There it was, the paper shield. The little sentence that would let Harbor First accept her check without admitting what the account meant. "I will not sign away history to make a deposit," she said. Grant's voice dropped. "Then I'm afraid you may leave here with neither." Evelyn placed the check back in its envelope and returned the passbook to her purse. But before she closed it, Tanya saw the first page again, just for a breath. The old stamp, the founding date, and beneath Thomas Mercer's handwriting, a second mark she recognized from the archive display Grant had ordered removed that morning. Not proof yet, but close enough to make Tanya's pulse quicken. Evelyn lifted her purse strap onto her shoulder. "I will wait." Grant nodded as if he had won. He did not understand that waiting was one of the few weapons age had sharpened instead of taken away. Evelyn sat in the waiting area beneath a framed slogan that said, "Your future, our promise." For 20 minutes, no one called her name. Customers came and went. A man opened a checking account. A college student asked about overdraft fees. 2 catering workers carried trays into the conference alcove where the donor event would be held. Grant moved through the lobby with controlled impatience, touching flower arrangements, checking the ribbon, correcting the angle of the podium microphone. Every few minutes his gaze found Evelyn, and each time his expression said the same thing. "Still here?" She sat with her purse in her lap and the passbook inside it. At the teller counter, Tanya Reed typed carefully into the archive system whenever Grant's back was turned. Most records after 1995 appeared instantly. Anything older required a separate search, and the founding files were scanned badly, half-indexed, and full of gaps. Still, one result surfaced: Founding Reserve Agreement. Mercer, Evelyn T. Restricted note: manual review required before closure. Tanya's hand paused over the mouse. Before she could open the file, Miles appeared beside her station. "Grant wants you in the alcove," he said. "Name tags. I'm with the customer record," he said now. Tanya minimized the screen, but not before Miles caught enough to understand why Grant had sent him. His eyes flicked toward Evelyn. "Is that hers?" Tanya kept her voice flat. "It's bank business." Miles gave a nervous smile. "Everything here is bank business." He walked away with the information in his face. 5 minutes later, Grant approached Evelyn holding a single sheet of paper. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, "I can offer you a simple path forward." Evelyn accepted the page but did not sign it. The language was clean, bland, and dangerous. By depositing the check, she would acknowledge that Harbor First made no representation regarding any historical ownership, founding interest, reserve status, or prior agreement connected to the account. In other words, the bank would take her money and erase the reason she came. "This is not necessary," she said. "It is standard. No, it is prepared." Grant's smile tightened. "Prepared documents can still be standard." Evelyn folded the paper once and set it on the chair beside her. I will verify the account without signing that. Then the deposit cannot be accepted. Show me the policy. A small pulse worked in Grant's cheek. Mrs. Mercer, I don't think you understand the modern regulatory environment. I understand liability language. He leaned down slightly, as if speaking to someone hard of hearing. You understand an old version of banking. That is the problem. The words landed harder than his tone. Evelyn thought of the green ledgers, the adding machines, the nights she stayed after closing because someone's mortgage payment had been posted wrong by $7.20. She thought of Thomas asleep at the dining table with ink on his cuff. She thought of men who had called her Mrs. Thomas while asking her to explain their own numbers to them. I understand enough, she said. Grant straightened. Then understand this. At noon, this branch will be full of invited guests. If you create a disruption, I will treat it as a security matter. Louise, standing near the vestibule, heard that part. Evelyn did too. You are threatening to remove me for asking about my account? I am setting expectations. Her fingers rested on the purse clasp. You sent the deadline, and I am giving you the only reasonable option before that deadline passes. The conversation had become quiet enough that nearby customers leaned closer without meaning to. Grant noticed. His voice warmed artificially. We want to help our senior customers, Mrs. Mercer, but we also have to protect them from confusion, exploitation, and fraudulent instruments. There it was again, protection used like a leash. Evelyn rose slowly. For an instant, Grant seemed relieved, assuming she was leaving. Instead, she walked to Tanya's window. I would like a copy of the dormant notice I was sent, Evelyn said, and a printed receipt showing I presented a cashier's check before the closure deadline. Tanya's eyes lifted. A small decision passed across her face. I can print a service interaction receipt, Tanya said. Grant's voice cut in. No need. Tanya did not move. Evelyn kept her attention on the teller. Please. The printer began to hum. Miles appeared from the alcove, frowning. Grant's body went rigid, but he could not stop the machine without making the whole lobby understand that paper scared him. Tanya passed the receipt under the glass. It was not the supporting proof that would later break the story open. It was smaller than that. A timestamp, a customer name, a note that Evelyn Mercer had appeared in person before the deadline with a cashier's check for deposit and was referred to management. Evelyn folded it into her purse beside the passbook. Grant's voice dropped to a private edge. You are making this harder on yourself. No, Evelyn said. I am making it harder to pretend I was never here. A donor in a linen jacket entered the lobby. Behind him came Denise Harper, the banking board representative, carrying a slim leather folder and wearing the composed expression of someone trained to hear trouble before it introduced itself. Grant instantly changed faces. Denise, he said, crossing toward her. Welcome. We're honored you could join us. Harper shook his hand, but her eyes moved briefly to Evelyn. Evelyn recognized the type. Not warm, not cruel, watchful. The donor event was beginning to gather around them. A photographer checked his flash near the podium. The Savannah Ledger reporter, Kelly Vance, arranged a small recorder and phone on the refreshment table. Staff members guided guests toward coffee and pastries. The public lobby remained open, which meant ordinary customers were still drifting in. Unaware, they were walking into the edge of something already cracking. Grant pulled Miles aside near the brochure rack. I want her gone before remarks, he whispered. Miles swallowed. How? Security if necessary. That may look bad. Grant's eyes sharpened. What looks bad is an elderly woman accusing this branch of mishandling a fantasy account in front of the board. She hasn't accused us. She will. Evelyn did not hear every word, but she saw enough. She moved to a small writing desk near the wall and opened her purse. For a moment, her hand hovered over her phone. She was not a woman who recorded people casually. She had been raised to believe dignity meant handling things directly. But dignity had not protected Thomas's name from disappearing. She pressed record and left the phone inside the outer pocket of her purse, microphone facing up. Then she removed the passbook. Not fully, just enough to open the front cover beneath the desk lip. The first page stared back at her. Thomas's handwriting, the founding stamp, the sentence in the margin. For the branch, if the branch forgets why. Behind that page, tucked into the fold where the binding had loosened, was a thin bank slip she had not shown anyone. One factual proof, separate from memory. Evelyn slid the slip deeper into the passbook and closed it. She had not come to embarrass anyone. She had come to keep an account alive and put money where her promise was. But as Grant Bell adjusted his silver tie and smiled for the photographer, Evelyn understood that quiet truth would not survive this room unless she chose the moment to make it public. At 11:58, Grant took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "welcome to Harbor First, where trust has always been our foundation." Evelyn stood from the waiting chair. Grant saw her, and his smile sharpened into warning. He still believed the old woman was the disruption. He had no idea she was the record. Grant Bell was 3 sentences into his welcome speech when Evelyn crossed the open lobby. He paused just long enough to make everyone notice her. She did not interrupt him with noise. She did not raise her voice. She simply approached the teller counter with the old passbook in one hand and the cashier's check in the other, while donors, customers, staff, and a local reporter watched the branch manager decide what kind of man he was going to be in public. Grant chose quickly. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, with a smile made for cameras, "this is not the appropriate time. This is the time your letter gave me." A few guests shifted near the coffee table. Denise Harper, seated in the first row, angled her chair toward the lobby. Kelly Vance's phone was already in her hand, screen dark but ready. Grant left the podium. "I have already explained the bank's position. You explained that you would not accept my deposit unless I signed away the account history." Miles Crow moved to the edge of the teller line, color rising in his neck. Grant's smile did not break. "That is an inaccurate characterization. It is the language on your form." Evelyn held out the paper he had given her. Grant did not take it. Instead, he addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. Occasionally, legacy customers misunderstand routine compliance procedures. We take these situations seriously, especially when there may be concerns about elder exploitation." The phrase landed like a public diagnosis. Evelyn's hand tightened around the passbook. Tanya, behind the glass, stopped breathing for a second. Luis lowered his chin. A woman waiting with a stroller whispered, "He shouldn't say that." Grant continued, smoother now. "Our duty is to protect vulnerable customers from being used by others to move questionable funds." "My daughter is not using me," Evelyn said. "I did not mention your daughter. You did not have to." That answer unsettled him. It suggested she had heard the accusation underneath the courtesy. Grant's voice cooled. "Then, help us protect you. Sign the acknowledgement, allow us to hold the instrument pending review, and we can avoid any further scene." Evelyn laid the cashier's check on the counter. "Deposit it into the account listed in this book." "I cannot do that. Then give me a written refusal." Grant's eyes hardened. A written refusal would have weight. It would have time, names, and policy language. It would be harder to bury than a conversation. "I will not generate unnecessary paperwork during an event. The deadline is today. And your behavior is why deadlines exist." The words were quiet, but they cut through every polite murmur in the room. Evelyn's face changed, not dramatically, no tears, no shaking collapse, just a small withdrawal, as if something inside her had taken one step back from the world. Grant saw it and pressed. "Mrs. Mercer, I am asking you one final time to sit down or leave the premises. If you continue interfering with branch operations, we will treat the matter as suspicious activity and possible attempted fraud. The contractor from earlier muttered, "For a deposit?" Grant ignored him. He reached for the passbook. Evelyn drew it close to her chest. No. That single word made the lobby sharper. Grant gave Louise a quick glance. "Escort Mrs. Mercer to the seating area." Louise did not move immediately. "Louise," Grant said. The security guard came forward, but slowly. "Ma'am, maybe we can just step aside and talk." "I have been waiting," Evelyn said. "I have talked. I have asked for records. I have asked for policy. I have asked for a receipt." Grant pointed toward the door without looking at her. "This is exactly the confusion I am trying to prevent." Evelyn turned the passbook in her hands, thumb resting along the taped spine. "There is no confusion. Then prove the funds are legitimate. I brought a cashier's check. Prove the account is yours. My name is inside. Prove the account is active. You sent me a letter saying it would close if I did nothing by today. Prove the historical claims you keep implying." Evelyn was silent. Grant finally had the opening he wanted. He faced the room again. "You see the difficulty? We cannot run a modern financial institution on memories and handwritten notes." Then he took the passbook. It happened fast enough that several people gasped after the fact. Evelyn had not expected him to pull it from her fingers. The taped spine bent, the cover folded back too far. A brittle edge of the first page lifted. "Careful," she said. Grant held the book away. "This item may be retained as part of our review. It belongs to me. It may belong to the bank if it relates to bank property." "No." The word came out softer this time. "Not weak. Wounded." Grant opened the passbook to the first page in front of everyone, careless with the old paper. "Let us be clear. A stamp from 1973 does not give anyone authority over this branch. A note in the margin does not override policy. A sentimental object does not become evidence because a customer becomes emotional. A chair scraped near the refreshment table." Tanya left her station and came around the teller line, stopping several feet away because she was still an employee and he was still her manager. "Grant," she said, "that document should not be handled like that." His head snapped toward her. "Return to your window. It may be part of an active account record. That is not your determination." Evelyn's phone, still recording in her purse pocket, captured every word. Grant did not know that. He only knew the room had begun slipping from him, and the only way he understood control was pressure. He placed the passbook flat on the counter and pressed his palm over the page. "Mrs. Mercer, if you will not cooperate, I will mark the account as unverified, refuse the deposit, and recommend closure under dormant property procedure. After today, you may pursue whatever claim you imagine through counsel." That was the sacred thing he threatened. Not money. Erasure. The final legal closing of Thomas Mercer's last living mark inside the bank he had built. Evelyn's mouth parted, but no words came. For one dangerous second, she was back at a dining table in 1989, newly widowed, surrounded by men telling her that signing quickly was the responsible thing, that fighting would hurt the institution, that legacy was safest in their hands. Her knees softened. Louise reached out not to restrain her but in case she fell. She steadied herself on the counter, then her hand moved to her purse. Grant misread it. "Do not remove anything else." Evelyn withdrew the folded service receipt Tanya had printed earlier and placed it beside the cashier's check. "I appeared before the deadline," she said. "That receipt proves only that you were here." "Yes." Her fingers returned to the purse and found the phone. She stopped the recording without taking it out. Then she lifted the passbook from beneath Grant's palm with a firmness that surprised him. He tried to hold it. She did not yank. She did not fight. She simply met his grip and waited until the room itself made him release it. Denise Harper stood. "Mr. Bell?" Harper said, her voice clear enough to end the murmurs. "I need you to step away from that document." Grant's face tightened. "Denise, this is an internal customer matter." "Not anymore." From the front doors came another voice. "Tanya, don't let him close that screen." Kelly Vance had said it, but she was not speaking as a reporter now. She was pointing toward the teller station, where Tanya moved first. She crossed back to her station and placed her hand over the mouse. Miles froze. On the monitor, half visible from the lobby side, the archive search result still showed one line. Founding Reserve Agreement. Mercer, Evelyn T. Manual review required before closure. Harper walked toward the counter. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, "do you have the original document with you?" Evelyn opened the passbook to the first page. This time, she held it herself. And as the old ink faced the room, Tanya Reed drew a breath so sharp everyone near her heard it. "I know that stamp," Tanya said. Grant Bell gave a short laugh, but it came out wrong. "Tanya," he said, "you recognize a stamp from a display table. That does not prove anything." Tanya did not answer him at first. She was staring at the first page of Evelyn's passbook, the way a careful person studies a signature before signing her own name beneath it. "It is not the display stamp," Tanya said. "It's the branch seal." Grant's jaw tightened. "Same thing." "No," she said. "The display materials have the public anniversary mark. This is the old operating seal, the one used before Harbor First incorporated under the Bell Group." Miles Crow shifted behind the teller counter. Denise Harper moved closer, but she did not touch the book. "Mrs. Mercer, may I see the page from where I stand?" Evelyn held it open. The old paper trembled slightly in her hands, but her voice did not. "My husband wrote that line," she said. Harper read it aloud only with her eyes. The margin note was small, tucked beside the founding deposit entry. "For the branch, if the branch forgets why." Grant exhaled through his nose. A handwritten sentimental note is not a legal instrument. "No," Evelyn said, "it is not." That surprised him. For a second, he thought she had yielded. Then Evelyn placed the passbook on the counter facing the room, keeping one hand on the cover so no one could take it again. "It is a memory," she said, "and memories are why people know where to look." The lobby listened, not politely now, completely. Evelyn pointed to the first entry. June 4th, 1973, Founding Reserve Account, Thomas and Evelyn Mercer. The amount was small because we had already spent nearly everything on the lease, the vault door, and the first 2 payroll weeks. Grant cut in. "This is irrelevant. It was the first account created for this branch. That is a claim. It is an entry. An old entry." Evelyn's eyes stayed on the page. Old is not the same as false. Kelly Vance's phone was raised now. Several customers had done the same. Luis stood near the doors with his hands still visible, no longer pretending this was routine security. Harper addressed Tanya. "Can you confirm what is on the system?" Grant snapped, "Denise, with respect, you do not have authority to conduct an examination in the middle of my lobby." Harper did not raise her voice. "I have authority to observe a possible improper closure of a legacy account during a public event hosted under board notice. And I am observing." That was the first moment Grant understood the day had turned. Tanya read from her monitor. Archive result shows Founding Reserve Agreement. Mercer, Evelyn T. Manual review required before closure. Grant's face reddened. "That file is incomplete." "Then why was closure recommended?" Harper asked. Miles swallowed. Grant's head moved a fraction toward him. Evelyn saw it. So did Harper. The manager tried to recover. "Dormant account procedure allows closure when ownership cannot be verified." "My ownership was verified when the account was opened," Evelyn said. "In 1973, yes. And since then, the institution changed." "So did I," Evelyn said. "But I am still here." The words did not sound dramatic. They sounded like arithmetic. Harper looked back to the passbook. "Mrs. Mercer, do you have anything connecting this book to the account record beyond the handwritten entry?" Grant seized on it. "Exactly. That is the issue. Anyone can preserve an old booklet." Evelyn opened the passbook carefully to the loose fold behind the first page. Grant's eyes narrowed. From the binding, she drew out a thin deposit slip, yellowed at the edges and protected by decades of being forgotten in the safest possible place. She laid it beside the first entry. "This was tucked inside the day my husband brought the book home," she said. "I found it again last night." Tanya leaned forward. "Harper did too." Grant spoke quickly. "That slip has no evidentiary value without authentication." "It has a stamped serial number," Evelyn said. Tanya's hand moved across her keyboard. "Read it to me." Evelyn read the number. The keys clicked once, twice, then stopped. Tanya's voice dropped. "It matches the archived reserve account." The room understood before Grant did because everyone else was still watching Evelyn. They saw the passbook not as a prop, not as a nuisance, but as a thing carried through widowhood, paperwork, silence, and years of being told the past was inconvenient. Grant was still watching the escape routes. "That could indicate a historical deposit," he said. "It does not establish current ownership of the branch." Evelyn did not flinch. "I did not say I owned the furniture." A few people gave a tense laugh. "I said the account was never supposed to be closed." The reserve agreement gave the founding holders review rights over any conversion, merger, or closure affecting the original branch trust. "When my husband died, your grandfather promised me those rights would remain on file." Grant's mouth opened. Evelyn lifted one finger from the page, not to silence him, but to hold the sequence together. "I believed him because I was grieving. That was my mistake. Today, you tried to make me sign a paper saying that history did not exist. That was yours." No one spoke. Then Evelyn reached into her purse and removed her phone. Grant's expression changed. "You recorded a private bank conversation?" "I recorded myself being threatened in a public lobby." Harper's eyes narrowed slightly. "Threatened how?" Evelyn tapped the screen once. Grant's own voice filled the space, thin and unmistakable. "If you continue interfering with branch operations, we will treat the matter as suspicious activity and possible attempted fraud." Then another line. "I will mark the account as unverified, refuse the deposit, and recommend closure under dormant property procedure." Evelyn stopped the playback. She did not need more. The passbook had carried the heart of it. The deposit slip had confirmed where to look. The recording showed what Grant had tried to do once the truth became inconvenient. Grant pointed at the phone. "That is taken out of context." Louise said quietly, "No, sir." "It is not." Everyone heard him. Grant spun toward the guard. "You work for this branch." Louise held his ground. "I do. That's why I listened." Miles backed away from the teller station as if distance could erase his hand reaching for the archive screen. Tanya stayed beside the monitor, protective now. Harper opened her leather folder and removed a card. "Mr. Bell, I am directing you to preserve all records related to this account, the closure recommendation, and today's attempted deposit. No deletion, no alteration, no further access by unauthorized staff." Grant's voice cracked at the edge. "You cannot freeze my branch during an event. I can request immediate preservation, and I can notify the board before I leave this building. Whether the branch closes to customers today will depend on whether you cooperate." Kelly Vance's recorder light blinked red. Grant saw it and tried one last time to become the reasonable man in the suit. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, turning back to Evelyn, "if there has been a misunderstanding, we can discuss this privately." Evelyn closed the passbook halfway, then left it open enough for Thomas's handwriting to remain visible. "No," she said. "One word. Calm, final, memorable." Grant's face tightened. "No, no more private rooms." The lobby held that line. Evelyn slid the cashier's check forward. "You will accept this deposit as presented before the deadline. You will issue a receipt without waiver language. You will preserve the account. And you will request a formal review of the founding reserve agreement in writing, today." Grant stared at her, as if age itself had betrayed him. Harper nodded once. That is a reasonable preservation request. Tanya returned to her terminal. I can process the deposit pending account review. Grant barked, Tanya. She did not stop. I am following the board representative's preservation direction and documenting management refusal. Miles whispered, Grant, don't. That whisper did more damage than any shout could have. It told the room that even his enabler knew the line had been crossed. The printer began to work. Not loudly, just enough. A receipt emerged in Tanya's hand, clean and current, showing the cashier's check accepted before the dormant deadline and the account placed under formal review, not closure. Tanya passed it to Evelyn. Evelyn took it with the same care she had given the passbook. Grant stood in front of the ribbon, the podium, and the anniversary poster that had erased the Mercer name. Behind him, the words 50 years of trust seemed suddenly less like a celebration and more like a question. Harper made a call from the side of the lobby. Within minutes, the event was postponed. The branch remained open only long enough to serve waiting customers. Then the board ordered an internal hold on legacy account closures, pending outside counsel's review. Real consequences rarely arrive that neatly. But his access to archive records was suspended before the end of the day. Miles was removed from teller systems pending inquiry. Tanya's service receipt and Evelyn's recording were copied for review. Kelly Vance left with enough to make every polished quote Grant had ever given sound different by morning. Evelyn gathered the passbook, the new receipt, and the fragile slip. Before she turned from the counter, she looked at Grant. Not with victory. With the sorrow of someone seeing a building forget the hands that raised it. My husband built this branch so people would not have to beg for respect while holding proof, she said. You made them beg anyway. Grant had no answer the room would believe. And for the first time that day, he was the one everyone watched in silence. By sunset, Harbor First had removed the anniversary poster from the lobby wall. Not forever, not as justice. Just because the words on it had become impossible to defend while outside counsel reviewed the records behind them. The donor event was rescheduled without Grant Bell at the podium. An email went to staff that evening, placing all legacy account closures on hold until an independent review was completed. Tanya Reed was asked to provide a statement, then quietly offered employee protection through the board's ethics policy. Luis Alvarez gave his account too, careful and factual. The way a man speaks when he knows the truth does not need decoration. Miles Crow was suspended from system access pending inquiry. Grant was placed on administrative leave 2 days later. No handcuffs, no dramatic hallway exit. Just a badge deactivated, a laptop collected, and the sudden discovery that polished men can become very ordinary when the institution stops reflecting them back as important. Kelly Vance's story ran Sunday morning. She did not call Evelyn a hero. Evelyn would not have liked that. The headline focused on the review of Harbor First's founding reserve account and the public confrontation that exposed it. But halfway through the article, there was one sentence that Marissa read 3 times at her kitchen table. The original passbook, preserved by Evelyn Mercer for more than 5 decades, appears to connect the disputed account to the bank's founding branch. Marissa called her mother with tears in her voice. "Daddy's name is in the paper," she said. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, the second coffee cup still on the table though it was almost noon. For a moment, she had to press her hand against the counter. "Yes," she said. "It is." The formal review took 6 weeks. That was how real repair moved. Slowly, through folders, interviews, scanned records, and people finally reading what had always been there. The board confirmed that the founding reserve account should never have been marked for routine dormant closure. The review rights attached to it had been mishandled across multiple management transitions, and Evelyn was restored as the account's recognized founding holder for the original branch trust. The bank did not suddenly become hers in the childish way rumors told it. The truth was more specific and stronger. She held the right to force review before the branch's founding protections could be erased. She held the right to be notified, heard, and recorded in any decision affecting that original trust. She held the right Grant had tried to make her sign away in a lobby full of witnesses. Harbor First issued a public apology. Evelyn accepted the paper copy and declined the private lunch. Instead, she requested 3 things: a corrected founder display with Thomas Mercer's name beside hers, a staff policy requiring written refusal notices for dormant account disputes, and a small community banking fund for seniors who needed help navigating records before they lost money or dignity to a deadline they did not understand. The board approved all 3. Grant Bell resigned before the review closed. The final report did not accuse him of theft. It cited improper pressure, attempted waiver of historical rights, mishandling of customer property, and failure to preserve records. His future in banking became a question for licensing committees and employers who now had the full report to read. That was enough for Evelyn. She had no appetite for revenge beyond the truth being made inconvenient to the right people. On the first Monday after the display was installed, Evelyn returned to Harbor First with Marissa and her granddaughter Lily. The lobby felt different, though the marble was the same. Tanya met them near the entrance, no longer hiding her smile. Louise gave Evelyn a respectful nod from the security desk. On the wall where the anniversary poster had been, a new framed photograph showed the old brick storefront from 1973. Beneath it were 2 names: Thomas Mercer, Evelyn Mercer. Lily, who was 9 and old enough to know when adults were trying not to cry, read the names out loud. "That's Grandpa Thomas." "That's him," Marissa said. Lily studied the picture. "And Grandma helped build a bank?" Evelyn felt the question move through her, gentle and heavy at once. "Yes," she said. "But more than that, we tried to build a place where people did not have to feel ashamed for needing help." Lily nodded as if that made perfect sense because children often understand dignity before adults teach them to bargain with it. Evelyn opened her purse and removed the passbook. The cover was still faded. The tape still held the spine. No restoration expert had made it beautiful. No museum case protected it. It remained what it had always been: a small, worn record of work, love, and refusal to disappear. She did not hand it to the bank. She handed it to Marissa. "Keep it somewhere dry," Evelyn said, "and don't let anyone tell you old paper can't speak." Marissa held it with both hands. For a while, the 3 of them stood beneath the photograph, saying nothing. Customers moved around them. A printer hummed. Somewhere behind the counter, Tanya explained a form to an elderly man slowly, without rushing him, without making him feel foolish for asking twice. Evelyn heard that and smiled. Not because everything was fixed, because something had been corrected in the direction of right. Later that afternoon, she went home and made 1 cup of coffee. Only 1. She sat at the kitchen table as sunlight moved across the empty chair opposite her. The second mug stayed in the cabinet. Not forgotten, not abandoned. Just no longer needed to prove that Thomas had been there. His name was back where it belonged. And Evelyn, after all those years of carrying the proof alone, finally let the drawer close without fear. If someone you loved built something good and the world tried to erase their name, what would you do to protect it? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories about quiet people who choose truth when it costs them something.